1985 was a year that captured the imaginations of football fans and non-football fans alike. And horror was everywhere you looked. Freddy Krueger haunted dreams, zombies rose in Day of the Dead, and a vampire even moved into suburbia in Fright Night. We even got a gothic take on Frankenstein starring Sting. No, Sting the singer, not the wrestler, Josh. Although it probably would have been way more interesting if it was the wrestler. But the most terrifying monsters that year were not on the big screen. They were on the small one, inside your home. Every football Sunday and even twice on a Monday night. They wore navy blue and orange and played on the hallowed grounds of a place called Soldier Field. I'm talking about the 1985 Chicago Bears. Now, the Chicago Bears didn't just win the Super Bowl. They absolutely decimated the New England Patriots by a score of 46-10. I always smile when I say that. If you want to know what watching that game felt like, just watch the beginning of the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You know, the moment that poor kid walks into the house and Leatherface appears for the first time and that steel door slams shut. Sure, that movie came out in 1974 and not 1985, but at the time it was one of the most horrifying moments in film history. And yet somehow what the Bears did to New England that January made that scene look tame by comparison. But as impressive as that victory was, it was really just another Sunday for the Chicago Bears. And that season, Sundays in the Chicago section of the NFC North were built on fear, thanks in large part to defensive coordinator Buddy Ryan and his creation of the 46 defense. The idea was simple. Choke the run and collapse the pocket. Stack six near the line of scrimmage, bring pressure from all over the place, and turn every offensive snap into a blinding panic attack. Remember season 2 of The Walking Dead, when the herd storms Herschel's farmhouse and it's so overwhelming that all the survivors can do is run? That's basically the Bears' 46 defense in zombie television terms. In short, Buddy Ryan basically unleashed a plague upon the NFL, one that feasted on the nightmares of offensive coordinators and quarterbacks alike. Not Dan Marino and the Miami Dolphins. Yes, thank you, Josh. I'm getting to that later in the episode. Can I continue, please? On this defense, you had Hall of Fame defensive end Richard Dent, a man who racked up 17 sacks that season, a man who was selected in the 8th round of the 1983 NFL Draft with the 203rd overall pick. Outside of Tom Brady, perhaps the living embodiment of finding value late in the draft. So to put that into perspective, every team passed on this man at least 7 times, including my New York Jets, which honestly does not surprise me in the least. And they could have used them too because the sack exchange was on its last legs by then, but I digress. The Bears also had another Hall of Famer on that defensive line, Dan Hampton, a man who smashed through offensive fronts like the Hulk smashing opponents in the Grandmaster's Arena in Thor Ragnarok. The defense also featured Otis Wilson, Wilbur Marshall, and probably the most recognizable name for casuals, William the Refrigerator Perry, who weighed in at an impressive 6'2", 335 pounds. And now to give you an idea of the girth of this man, the average adult male wears a ring between sizes 10 and 12. Perry's Super Bowl ring was a size 25. That is not a ring. That is a crown that might even be too big for most people's heads. And Perry wasn't just a defensive lineman either. Bears head coach Mike Ditka even used him in goal line situations, letting him barrel through defenses like the Juggernaut might barrel through. Josh, quick, give me the name of a mediocre Marvel team that wouldn't stand a chance against the Juggernaut. The West Coast Avengers. Perfect. As easily as the Juggernaut would barrel through the West Coast Avengers. You know, you're pretty useful sometimes. Oh, thank you very much. Okay, don't get cocky. And what would the 85 Bears defense be without mentioning the guy at the center of it all? Literally. Middle linebacker Mike Singletary. A man who made grown professionals seriously question their life choices. Ask any quarterback who's stared over their center into those bulging, unblinking eyes. They will tell you a story that is sure to keep you awake at night. But hey, if you're not sleeping, then Freddy can't get you, so I guess it's not all bad. Unless, of course, we're talking about A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, which also unfortunately comes up later in this episode. But there was someone else on this defense who might just be the most interesting name of all. A man who, in my opinion, went on to achieve something far greater than a Super Bowl ring. And that man's name was Steve Mongo McMichael, Chicago's all-pro defensive tackle. A big, boisterous dude who, after football, moved on to WCW and became a pro wrestler. Early on, he teamed up with Kevin Green. And then, the unthinkable happened. Steve Mongo McMichael turned heel on Kevin Green and joined the Four Horsemen. Yes, the Four Horsemen, led by none other than the Nature Boy Ric Flair. Now ask yourself this and be honest. What is the higher honor? Winning a Super Bowl? Or being handpicked by Arn Anderson to join one of the most feared and iconic wrestling stables in history? The answer is clear, as far as I'm concerned. McMichael went on to win the WCW United States title and often carried around with him a steel briefcase as a weapon. God, I wish wrestling was more like real life. We'd all have entrance music and finishing moves, and I'm telling you right now, there is no question life would be way richer. By the way, what would your entrance music and finisher be? Let me know in the comments. Now, the Horsemen were known for their technical wrestling skills. So McMichael, who, let's be honest, lacked that skill set, was not exactly beloved by WCW fans. And yes, this is the same fan base who chanted Goldberg nonstop, forcing WCW to make him so invincible that Scott Hall had to cattle prod him to justify his first loss. You're spending a lot of time on this wrestling segment. You think you should move on to the offense? You know what, Josh? That's probably a good idea. Talking about this Goldberg thing angers me more than... You know what? I don't think there's anything that angers me this much. What about the Jets the last 2 decades? Why don't we just move on to Act 2? Now, on the offensive side of the ball, the Bears relied on a run-heavy attack, led by the late great Walter Payton, aka Sweetness. He ran for over 1,500 yards and scored 11 touchdowns that season, gliding behind the brutal offensive line featuring Jim Covert, Mark Bortz, and Jay Hilgenberg. Now, watching Peyton run was like watching a movie so perfectly crafted you wish you lived in that world. Even if that world happens to include a maniacal villain selling killer Halloween masks to unsuspecting kids and promising a big Halloween giveaway. And yes, I'm talking about Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, as I often do if you are new to the channel. At receiver, the Bears had Willie Gault and Dennis McKinnon, and the man throwing them the ball, well, he wasn't exactly what you would call a franchise quarterback. But damn was he cool for the era. I mean, the headband, the sunglasses. This man had aura. There's absolutely no other way to describe it. Of course, I'm talking about number 9, Jim McMahon. A man who I believe could have been an 80s movie icon if he hadn't chosen a career in football. And dare I say, he could have starred in some of the most iconic films of that era. Die Hard, Terminator, Back to the Future. I mean, those movies might not have even missed a beat if he was in them. Well, okay, Die Hard probably would have missed a beat. I mean, Bruce Willis was a god in that film. Now, McMahon ranked 20th in passing yards that season with 2,392. He completed 57% of his passes and threw 15 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. But in the realm of NFL quarterbacks, McMahon was basically just the guy. Not terrible, not incredible, just kind of there. But when you've got a defense that good and a running back you can hand the ball to and watch churn out first down after first down, it's pretty hard to fail. I'm looking at you, Troy Aikman. Seriously though, this Bears team was so stacked that Justin Fields or Zach Wilson probably could have even won a Super Bowl with them. I mean, their only job would be to not screw anything up. And as I just said that, I reminded myself that we're talking about Zach Wilson and Justin Fields. So it's likely that not even this roster, even with all the Infinity Stones intact, wouldn't have been enough to carry them to glory. Anyway, as if the 85 Bears defense and offense were not impressive enough, in my mind, the most fascinating part of this team didn't have anything to do with what they did on the field. It was their off-field antics that really stand out when you look back. And by that, I mean the impact that they had on pop culture. Weren't they like a band or something? You're on the right track, Josh, but no, technically they were not a band. Okay, so then why did they have a music video? Well, if you would stop asking questions and let me get to the next act, I'm about to explain that. In 1985, the Bears were absolutely steamrolling opponents. When they hit 12-0, they had outscored their last 3 opponents by a combined score of 104-3. I mean, pure domination. Their first and only loss of the season came on December 2nd, against the 8-4 Dan Marino-led Miami Dolphins, which I do find curious considering the Dolphins are the only undefeated team in NFL history, and somehow, as if by magic, were the ones to tarnish the Bears' perfect record. And people try to tell me all the time that football is not haunted, that there is not something else out there pulling the strings. I mean, the evidence continues to be all around us. I do not know how else to say it. So, of course, the 1972 Dolphins got to pop the stupid cork on their stupid little champagne bottle. Again. I mean, the season was what, 6 games when they went undefeated? I think it's about time we put that champagne bottle back in the wine cellar. The regular season was 14 games in 1972. Okay, whatever, Josh. 6, 14, same thing. Anyway, a day after that loss, what do you think the Bears did? Had a players-only meeting? Sat down and reviewed game tape to see what could have gone wrong? No. They went out and recorded a music video and called it the Super Bowl Shuffle. And I just want to say, if a team did that today, in season, especially coming off a loss, the Colin Cowherds of the world would lose their minds. Those types would probably script 2-hour segments about how the team is falling apart and too unserious to be taken seriously. Now, the point of the Super Bowl Shuffle was simple: to let everyone know the Bears were here for 2 reasons. To chew bubblegum, and of course to win the Super Bowl. But the idea to film that video actually came before the Miami loss. But still, you'd think someone might have stepped in and said, hey, maybe we're getting a little ahead of ourselves here, why don't we put this whole music thing on the back burner for now and just focus on football. But that didn't happen, so obviously the decision was made to show every team in the league that this loss did not concern the Bears one bit. It only served to make them angrier. And dancier, apparently. And I don't know, if you will remember of any other team in the league at that point, terror must have filled your heart. They must have felt exactly like that kid in Fright Night when he witnessed Jerry Dandridge, the vampire, drink holy water right in front of him. I mean, you think you got this guy right where you want him, and then he goes out and makes a music video just to show you that he does not care what you do. He's winning the Super Bowl, whether you like it or not. Anyway, wide receiver Willie Gault was credited with coming up with the idea for the Super Bowl shuffle along with 2 Chicago record producers. And I find it remarkable that he not only convinced all of his teammates, but also Mike Ditka to go along with this. That is not confidence. That is sitting at a Dungeons and Dragons table and rolling a natural 20 on persuasion. He might have also been able to convince the entire city of Chicago to elect him king for eternity if he really wanted to. And speaking of missed opportunities, earlier I mentioned that 1985 was a great year for horror movies, and I still stand by that. But there were also some unfortunate sequels made. Like The Howling 2, Your Sister is a Werewolf. Yes, that's the actual title. And if you ever have a hankering to watch a movie that lives up to its ridiculous name, look no further. And we also witnessed the return of Jason Voorhees in Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning. And I did this because we did not get Jason in that movie. We got a copycat killer named Roy. To say that fans were not happy is a massive understatement. And probably why the next installment was titled Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives. Basically, it was the studio telling us, no, seriously, he is going to be in this movie. We promise this time. And then there was A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge. A movie that seemed to set us up for an incredible revenge story against the first movie's protagonist, Nancy Thompson. But instead, they ditched her completely. And in this movie, Freddy tried to possess a teenage boy that we've never seen before. Then he even showed up at a pool party in the real world, proving that we're not safe from Freddy whether we are asleep or awake. How terrifying. But that pool party was when most fans checked out of the movie. I know it's when I did. Now, what do terrible horror sequels from 1985 have to do with the Chicago Bears? Well, much like those movies I mentioned, whose follow-ups left a lot to be desired, the Bears unfortunately never saw a repeat of their magical season. But it's not like the team completely fell off. They still won 11 or more games in 5 of the next 7 seasons under head coach Mike Ditka. But 1985 was the last time they would ever hoist a Lombardi trophy. Now, the Bears might someday win another Super Bowl. Yes, Bears fans, believe it or not, it might actually happen, eventually. But hopefully not before the New York Jets, though. Because I don't know how much more I could take of this. But I'm not sure we'll ever see another team capture the heart and soul of America and pop culture quite like the Bears did in 1985. By the way, do you think Jim McMahon would have been a good protagonist in some of the horror movies you mentioned? I think if Jim McMahon had been the protagonist and called upon guys like Mike Singletary and Richard Dent to help him out in those movies, then guys like Jason and Freddy might have been too battered and broken to even consider appearing again in future sequels.